Hey yo, it's Retro. Welcome to another video. As y'all can see, quality has been upped a bit. I have made an investment. But no, today I wanted to talk about Superman. I've been reading a lot of comics, more Superman comics that I've read in my life, honestly. Last month, I've been reading just ridiculous amounts, rereading and, kind of going back and reading stuff that I never read. Today, I wanted to launch a new series called Retro's Redemption, where I take comic characters and comic books, especially ones that weren't given their due, that were heavily trashed, have a bad rap towards them, and I wanted to recontextualize them, give them my perspective on them and how I feel about them, especially years later. Today, we're gonna talk about Superman from the New 52. Now, if you're new to comics, the New 52 was a line-wide reboot. I don't want you to feel discouraged. A reboot is not a bad thing, honestly. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. A lot of times it's a good thing. It is a way for new readers to come in and also for old readers to kind of get something new. That's how I feel about it. Sometimes it is good to just get a fresh start on a lot of characters. Superman got it hit the hardest. I feel like Batman wasn't really hit too bad. New 52 Batman is universally recognized as one of the best Batman runs ever. New 52 Superman, I feel like, doesn't get the respect that it deserves. This isn't the first time DC has done a reboot. If you heard of Crisis on Infinite Earths, that was a huge event that ended up erasing the multiverse, essentially, that restarted a couple of characters. For some characters it didn't. Superman, for example, he just got a updated origin and they moved forward. Batman got an updated origin with Batman Year One, which was an amazing origin. Superman with Man of Steel back in the 80s was interesting. It wasn't, I don't like it. I don't like Superman Man of Steel. I think it is a spit in the face to Superman as a character, what he's supposed to represent. When you take a character who is supposed to be champion of the oppressed and put a lot of patriotic and American imagery into his character, into his comics, it honestly muddles that image of being champion of the oppressed. I feel like that's kind of what sets Superman back several, steps. Now we've come many years later, after Crisis on Infinite Earths, after Superman Man of Steel, fuck John Byrne, after his bastardization of Superman, we have New 52, which happens roughly 30 years after the Man of Steel happened. And Superman is wholly and completely reset, which, looking back, I think wasn't a bad idea. I think Superman was kind of in a weird state. I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of Superman comics from the 90s and the early thousands. There are a few that are really good. There are a few that are great. A lot of them are miniseries. You have Superman for All Season by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely. You have Superman Up, Up and Away, which was kind of a relaunch of the character with Kurt Busiek and Jeff Johns. And then you have Camelot Falls by Kurt Busiek and Carlos Pacheco. These are good comics. All-Star Superman is an amazing comic. Superman for All Seasons is another amazing comic. You even have Superman Birthright by Mark Waid and Lionel Francis Yu, which was, in my opinion, it's the best Superman origin ever. But again, there aren't really, for 30 years, when you have a bunch of miniseries that are the highlights of a character, that's a problem. So in comes New 52, and I'm not going to lie and say the New 52 Superman was a perfect time for the character. There was a lot of tribulation, but the highs are extremely high. In the New 52, the entire DC universe was essentially reset. Superheroes had only been active for 5 years, give or take. Superman in particular is significantly younger. When Action Comics by Grant Morrison and Rags Morales starts, he is, I want to say, like mid-20s. Meanwhile, Batman is a well-established superhero, and man, he is an adult. He is probably 30, 35 years old at this point, which is interesting because, Superman and Batman are supposed to be best friends, they're supposed to be companions, but it gives this Superman a chance to kind of reset the record and reintroduce himself. Action Comics by Grant Morrison and Rags Morales is easily the best Superman run for my money. It doesn't end the best. It doesn't, it's not perfect, but Grant Morrison's incorporation of Kryptonian heritage, returning Superman back to the champion of the oppressed, attacking corrupt corporations, just in general, it's an eat the rich type of storyline for the character. And it's a big middle finger to the military, to America, to essentially the way things are. And it's Superman trying to push and push and push for what things should be. Another huge component that I absolutely adore about this series is the fact that Grant Morrison implements this idea that there is no such thing as something being impossible. Superman constantly is pushing this envelope of what is possible, what he can do, what anybody can do. He's constantly telling people that doubt him to not say that something is possible. As long as there is a will, there is a way. And I adore this. It's what makes Grant Morrison an amazing writer. They take the suspension of belief and abstraction and really push it into superhero comics. And it makes for genuinely amazing comics, timeless comics, honestly. Action Comics is really where the beginning of Superman starts. He doesn't even have a proper suit until the end of his first arc. He's running around with a t-shirt, jeans, some boots, and his cape. It's awesome. It's one of the best redesigns, just in theory, in concept, the fact that like this Superman who is so radically left, who wants for America to change, is not like in the best armor or isn't in this well put together suit. He is in regular ass clothes. He can be anybody. Superman can be anybody. And to me, that's what that image gives. But yeah, that's where the beginning of this character really starts. It's an interesting time for the character, I think. It gives all the writers who are taking on this character a fresh start. You know, Superman is young. Like I said, he is a young character at this point. He has a short temper. He is rushing to solve things. It's very trial and error as well. It's explained in Scott Snyder's Superman Unchained that a lot of things that he tries to do to push society is not perfect. He doesn't have this perfect idea of what things should be, of how things are supposed to be. So of course, like, he tries things, and if it fails, he's gonna try something else. And to me, it's not bad advice to give to somebody. Just give it a shot. I feel like this time for this character was not given its respect. I understand the fact that a reboot can turn away folks. I understand that it may be scary to have change. You know, Superman has all this history before the New 52, but that history is not going anywhere. When New 52 came, it was a time to just try new things for old characters, to kind of recontextualize these characters in the modern age. A lot of these characters started in the 30s. The world is so different now. Well, the world is so different in 2011 than it is now, and it's so different from when it was in the 30s and 40s. So having these characters get a fresh start was, to me, it should have been welcomed. Now, the New 52 was a smash hit, of course. It did bring in a lot of new readers. It turned away some old readers, but it brought in a whole bunch of new readers. The amount of people I can say had started DC with New 52, obviously, like my generation growing up around that time, we're like 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. So we're getting into comics. If you're wanting to get into comics, you're getting it to the point where you're actually understanding what's going on a lot more. So yeah, that would be where a lot of people start reading comics. You know, what a time, honestly. You get like this Superman who is back to his golden age. To me, that's where his ideology is at its best. Now I talk about where he is at that point and what kind of led there. Superman during the thousands, during the 90s, to me, was a very stale character. I feel like there were a lot of special writers who were taking on the character. I don't think there were a lot of monumental stories that happened during this time. The most people refer to is the death and return of Superman, that's unfortunate that Superman's most popular story is the fact that he died. That is fucked up. That's just so fucked up. I think, again, the fact that he was kind of reset to be this Republican figure, to be this patriotic figure. Superman shouldn't be carrying an American flag. He is an immigrant. While he wants to integrate into Earth society, he's trying to balance both his heritage and where he is now, and trying to understand and trying to understand where he is and trying to still not forget where he came from. And it's unfortunate because he didn't really get to experience where he came from. So he's trying to juggle both. He's learning about both still. In my opinion, New 52 was a needed reboot for the character. Fuck John Byrne. New 52 Superman had a beautiful amount of writers and series. Like I said earlier, Action Comics by Grant Morrison and Rags Morales is excellent. I talked about it in my top 10 comics that everybody should read. It's not perfect, but it pushes that envelope of what Superman should be and who he is in this modern age, what the golden age represents for this Superman, what being a champion of the oppressed means. Then you have Batman/Superman by Greg Pak and Jay Lee, which is honestly the best Batman/Superman series. And it is simply because it understands the difference between Batman and Superman to its very core. Not just imagery, but how they operate. Now these two are very different at this time, of course. Superman is young. He's still figuring out how to be a superhero, still figuring out how to be Superman. And Batman is a lot more well established. He is a lot more calculated. But I think that Greg Pak used that to his advantage. And it's not his fault, but he definitely wrote some of the best Superman stories in this series, and it properly juxtaposes these characters, even juxtaposing the worlds that they live in. Metropolis and Gotham look so different. Jay Lee's art in this series, just a perfect example of how you use imagery to its fullest potential. Gotham looks so dark and like an underworld, very gothic, while Metropolis looks like this utopia. It's very interesting, and to still guide the character Superman through this series, improve him and allow him to grow, while Action Comics is still doing it with Grant Morrison and then later Greg Pak. Amazing idea to have this series. You also had Scott Snyder and Jim Lee write Superman Unchained, which is just like an awesome Superman story. It does what Superman Camelot Falls does, but a lot better, where there is this character, what the fuck am I looking for? There is this character who is like Superman. He had came to Earth and the government had taken him in and used him as a weapon. He has a similar power set to Superman, and they had been using him since World War I. Essentially, he's the reason Hiroshima fell. He was the bomb that hit Hiroshima, not an actual bomb. He's essentially what Superman could have been if the government found him instead of, Ma and Pa Kent. This series kind of showcases Superman's ability to influence people, because this character was very staunchly for America and for supporting the American government until Superman had several talks with him, until he had worked with Superman, and it came to a point where he sacrificed himself for the betterment of the world instead of being used as a pawn for America. Superman Unchained is an awesome Superman story, one of the best, genuinely. There is a time in DC after the New 52 called DCU, which kind of changed things a whole lot, really. At this point, Superman had been testing out this new power that he found out called a solar flare. Whenever he used it, he loses his power for 24 hours. It got to a point where when he used it, someone siphoned his energy and he ended up being significantly weaker. Still powerful, still more powerful than the average human, but he couldn't fly, he didn't have a super hearing, he didn't have x-ray vision. So a lot of these things that like Superman is known for, he didn't have. He had super strength, and it allowed for this Superman to kind of be this boots on the ground, I'm going to make change myself kind of character. And Jin Lun Yang and Greg Pak were the writers during this time, and it made for an amazing storyline. Truly, it's unfortunate because I wanted to see this character continue. I wish moving forward, this was the Superman that kept going. It's unfortunate that we had this Superman die at the end of New 52, was replaced by post-crisis Superman instead, which is a whole storyline. Essentially Superman from post-crisis didn't actually, die. He kind of just laid low for a while. Word came out that New 52 Superman was dying, and post-crisis Superman kind of took the reins and stepped up. It's unfortunate because this was still a very moderate, very Republican Superman, and it shows in Superman Rebirth a lot. There's a very weird issue where Superman is giving the military a huge benefit of the doubt. A lot of these New 52 characters were changed irreversibly and essentially replaced with their post-crisis selves in a way, not in the way that Superman was, but differently. Batman stayed the same. A lot of these characters did stay the same, but it's unfortunate that Superman died. He did not deserve to die. Eventually they did merge, which is a roundabout way of DC saying they fucked up, but whatever. It's very strange time for Superman, but the stories during the 52 was amazing. If you want to read them, it goes Action Comics by Grant Morrison and Rags Morales, which is Action Comics 2011 number 1 through 18, and then there's a number 0 issue. There's an annual in there as well. There's Superman Unchained by Scott Snyder and Jim Lee. Then you have Batman/Superman by Greg Pak and Jay Lee. That runs pretty much up until Greg Pak takes over the main Action Comics title, Action Comics number 25 to 50, which is Greg Pak and Aaron Kuder's Action Comics run. You also have Jinlun Yang's Superman Volume 1 Before Truth, and then you have Superman Savage Dawn, which kind of wraps up this entire final era of Superman during this time. Very unfortunate. Honestly, I genuinely hate that the Superman died. After reading it this past month, I'm genuinely shocked. I loved reading these stories. It gives me a sense of hope, and that's what Superman represents, especially during these terrible times in America. But yeah, that's my new series, Retro Redemption. I don't know how many I'm going to do. This is not going to be a thing where my next video will be a Retro Redemption. I need some time to go through it and come up with my thoughts for what I'm going to do next. It's probably gonna be like Spider-Man or something like that, but we'll see. Until then, like the video, comment what you guys think about New 52 Superman. Do you think he's underrated? Do you think he's misunderstood? Do you think he deserved way better? Subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.